Good morning, everyone, and it's good to continue our classes. This class, I'm going to speak a little bit about the land of Israel and our work, our place in it, to the point where, about the point about the how we and three specific sites in the Jewish history and primordial within the civilization of Israel represent a very strong moral and historical and spiritual foundation of the Jewish connection to the land of Israel. So let's go. We are in general with reading from the book of Genesis. And if we look at the flow of the book of Genesis, we see that starting from the parsha of Lech Lecha, that is the parsha when God tells Abraham that he has to leave his birthplace, or which we know as Ur Kasdim, leave that birthplace area and go to the land which Hashem will show him, which is Eretz Yisrael, which is the land of Israel. And then in the parsha, Abraham moves, goes to the land of Israel, and Hashem there promises him to establish an everlasting covenant with this to the Jewish people and with the land that he is in. When we continue with the flow of the readings in Genesis, we come to the parsha after that, when we read Chaya Sarah, and we find the death of Sarah. And at that time, Abraham looks for a burial place for his wife, for Sarah, and in that burial place, he purchases a plot of land. So that's in Chaya Sarah. There he purchases the area which we now call Hebron, and he makes this acquisition in the land of Israel as a burial place for his wife. As the parshas flow on further, we see Yitzchak. We see the story of Yitzchak and Isaac and the Akedah, how he's brought up as a potential sacrifice in the land of Israel. Traditionally, we say that is a place where the altar of the temple was going to be built in that exact area, and that Isaac becomes a holy person. His body is considered a holy person, and God tells him that even though there are trials and tribulations in his life, he is not to leave the land of Israel. And then his children, that is Yitzchak's children, that his progeny, which will continue the land of Israel, is required to leave the land of Israel, forge a relationship with the areas outside Israel, but then eventually he comes back to Israel after seeing God's blessings that he has outside of Israel. He brings back him and his family back to the land of Israel, back to the promised land. So over the entire book of Genesis, and culminating it right at the end of the book of Genesis, when Joseph is sent down to Egypt against his will, we see this forged connection to Israel. And then as the parshas go on afterwards, the Jews into the book of Exodus, the Jewish people leave Israel and go back and are promised to go back to the land of Israel. So this is a flow of the parshas which relate to the beginning of the promise from God for the promised land, a acquisition in Israel to cement the connection to the land, and then eventually, as we read in the entire 5 books of Moses of how the Jews come back to the land of Israel and our promised land will to fulfill the promise of conquering the land and the acquisition of the land. So the idea that we expressed just at the beginning, that is that the foundation of the Jewish connection to the land of Israel, this idea originates in a Midrash Rabbah, in one of the teachings of the Midrash, and then we're going to bring together a beautiful idea about the land of Israel, the Jewish connection to it, and why it had to be, acquired, and then a universal vision that about the land of Israel. So the Midrash tells us that Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda, the son of Rabbi Simon, Rabbi Shimon in Bereishit Rabbah. He teaches that he makes a teaching that's in Parshas Be'era in section 73, and it goes as follows: Shloisha Mekemes ein hagoyim yechelem Yisrael. There are 3 places regarding which the nations of the world cannot accuse Israel of not acquiring land, and will say to the people of Israel, you have stolen these. What are those 3 places? They are the starting off with the burial place of Abraham. So in the Parsha of Chaya, we read about how Abraham purchases this land, the land from Ephron, and the verse tells us explicitly that Abraham paid for the land. He in front of all the people of the area that is in front of Hebron, and all in front of the people of Ephron, and all the people, he acquired the Cave of Machpelah in Hebron, and he paid for it. And the verse says, "V'yishkol Abraham le'Ephron kesitah," and it says he weighed it. And the verse continues that he weighed out the money. He paid him the full value of the mount, which is an interesting teaching in itself. Now, this full value expression is used in 3 places, which will in 2 other places, which will come. So, at that regarding the Cave of Machpelah, it says Abraham weighed out to Ephron the money that he had named, meaning that Ephron said to Ephron, as the story goes, Ephron said to him, or the narrative says to him, really, Abraham, as part of your being a settler over here, you really should have a portion on it, but you can take it for free. Abraham insists and says, no, I want to pay for it, and he pays, and then Ephron, in a very sly mechanism, says, well, something which is worth the value, the value of the 400 shekels. What's that between us? So Abraham understood that this is how much money he wanted, and the verse says, and he weighed out that money, and he gave it to him in the best currency that was possible at the time. That is to say, there was an explicit discussion and an explicit commercial transaction that even though God had promised the land to Abraham, even though Abraham was a resident in that area, nevertheless he purchased this land from Ephron so that there would be no potential discussion about, as the Midrash puts it. The Midrash puts it as the words that the nations of the world can't say that this is a stolen area. So this the 2 other events happened in our history, which are mentioned explicitly in the Torah, and that's regards the Temple Mount. So that is, I'm just reverting back to the original Midrash of the of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Shimon, that these are the three places which the nations of the world can't say you have stolen them: that the Cave of Machpelah, the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and the Tomb of Joseph in Shechem. The verse says explicitly in Chronicles, Chronicles 1, 21, 25, that King David gave to the person who owned that area 600 shekels of gold for that place. And also it says in relationship to the tomb of Joseph, that Abraham acquired a portion of the field for 100 kesitah. So there are three explicit places. Now you have to know that the Torah and in the writings of the Torah rarely records any commercial details of anything. I mean, there's that the Torah is not a book of commercial history. Yet in these three specific cases, it gives the exact amount of monies that were paid. So that this Midrash highlights this to show that these sites were acquired not only by the inheritance that the land of Israel was promised to Abraham and given to him, but also that steps were taken through a transparent mechanism that was recorded in the Torah, and through a justice mechanism, that there was a commercial transaction which actually completed the sale. So that shows that these particular three sites, demonstrating that holiness in our teachings and in our tradition is in some ways you can say inseparable, even though the land was promised to land of Israel was promised by God, as God created the world, so God has the capability of giving it to whoever he wants. Nevertheless, these acquisitions were done through moral conduct, the correct conduct, and integrity and accountability in an open fashion. So why is it? So with that, we have to think, and we ask ourselves the question: but why might the Torah emphasize these specific purchases? Why was it that the Torah wanted to emphasize these very specific commercial transactions that was done for the sake of the land of Israel, and not relying on the idea that this is a holy land that was given to a holy people, Israel, as the first interpretations we have in the Torah about the word Bereishit, that in the beginning God created the land, in the beginning of time, when God created the world, it was done for the purpose of the two things which are called Bereishit, the people of Israel, who are called Bereishit meaning the first, a first, and taking a first place in the world, and the Torah, which is also considered a first, a unique first entry point of the world. So continuing. So what is the deeper meaning? So we can learn from a understanding, that is a teaching that was taught in relationship to Abraham's purchase. So in that idea which we said about in which is the place where Abraham purchases the field, right? So, and that is, and as I said, Genesis 23:16, verse 16, where he weighed out the land. Okay, so we find later on in the Torah, in Vayikra, in Leviticus, in 27:16, it discusses a particular idea that when a person wants to give to holy things, a portion of his assets. If a person wants to give part of his land to the Beis Hamikdash for the uses of the Holy Temple, if he wants to dedicate something to Hashem, then there is considered like a standard. There is like a standard valuation that your person has to use for his land. So in Leviticus and in Vayikra 27:16, it says that if a person wants to give his field and he wants to estimate its value, so a person the size or the standard unit of valuation that a person is supposed to use is so if a person wants to dedicate a field, so it says a soda zera kerem. So if a area of land wants to be evaluated, then a person has to set it up and has to measure seeing the measure of the land, and a person gives this land and to the temple. So it says, so I'm just reading the verse in the English. The man dedicates to the Lord a field which he's bought, which he has purchased before, and when he measures the field, so the unit he can give is 50 cubits by 50 cubits in a square. He dedicates that field in that unit. So therefore, now we have an extraordinary teaching from one of the commentators called the Panach Raza. And he says that a field which can sow this amount of barley, which is the size of what we said, right? So if a person can sow a chomer of barley, and that's valued at 50 silver shekels. So the chomer, that's the unit in the Torah, is actually 30 saw, another measurement. That's an area of 50 cubits by 50 cubits. So that tells us that one saw of seed is needed to sow this area of 30 saws. So in square cubits, that turns out to be 30 saw by 50 cubits by 50 cubits, which that turns out to be, if you do the little math, it comes out to be 75,000 square cubits. And we're told that 75,000 square cubits has an estimated value of 50 silver shekel. Now, this 50 shekels and this area, the 75,000 square cubits, that is one chomer. And if we look at this calculation, we see that this is the area which Abraham bought in Hebron, and that payment is 400 times. That is he paid 40 shekels. So if you divide that by 50 shekels as one standard unit, that means that Abraham paid 8 times as much for that area. So Abraham bought a parcel of land that was 8 times 7. He paid out 8 times 75,000 square cubits. That turns out to be 600,000 square cubits. Why are we doing this calculation? Because this shows us that Abraham's payment of the 400 shekels to Ephron represents a field 8 times the size. It's 600,000 square, symbolizing a space for the traditional number that we have for the amount of Jewish people that went out of Egypt. What does that show us? That Abraham prophetically paid for the land of Israel, which was to be acquired for the 600,000 Jews, that's the number, the count that we say that left Israel at the time of the going out of Egypt. So we have this tradition. We have this tradition that this is 600,000 square cubits in total. That this shows that Abraham's field, which he which he bought, symbolically he purchased for the exact number of Jews which stood at the Har Sinai at the time when the Hashem made the covenant with the Jewish people with the Torah. So we have a tradition that a human being, a standard person, takes up as a, for instance, as a in size or in a burial place, the person takes up 1 square cubit. That's his personal space. So that that if a person stands tall and he takes up 1 square cubit by 1 square cubit, that is to say that our message, that the message is a striking message, because Abraham prophetically when he bought the burial site, he bought a spiritual inheritance in the land of Israel for all the Jewish people that would be in the future, the 600,000 souls, the 600,000 people who would come to Israel. That is that is this ancestral land of Israel was purchased by Abraham. So therefore, Abraham made an acquisition, a physical acquisition in the land of Israel. And similarly, so we found that as we mentioned before, that the area regarding the tomb of Joseph, that Yaakov Yaakov bought when he came back, he bought a parcel of land, as it says in Genesis 33:19, that he bought this area of a parcel of land, the place where which is now known as the tomb of Joseph. And similarly, King David, in order to make sure that there'll be no issue in relationship to the place where the temple would eventually be built in Jerusalem, that he purchased it from whoever was from Ornan, who was the local owner of that land. So this shows that our connection goes to the very roots of Israel. Now the Rebbe added on another level of meaning to it. He added that the Cave of Machpelah, the place of Hebron. We know that there are three. We know that there are. This is the place of the burial place for Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But further than that, we also know, well, we have by tradition, that this is the burial place for Adam Rishon, for the first man, for Adam and Chava, for Adam and Eve. So that is the first human beings. So Abraham, by purchasing this area, he links the covenant that Hashem made to the Jewish nation. He connected this to this the covenant that Hashem has with the Jewish people. He linked this to the very roots, the very beginnings of humanity. That is the place of the first man that was created from Adam Rishon, from Adam and Eve. So this piece of land which Abraham consecrated, purchased, and was given by Hashem, this shows the bridge. This shows the connection to the parentage of all humanity with the Jewish people. So this act declares and emphasizes the idea that the connection of the nation of Israel's role as a bridge between God, mankind in general, and the Jewish mission. That is, the Jewish mission by itself has never been isolationist. The Jewish nation by itself has provided the world and the whole of humanity a universal destiny, and has shared its knowledge, its morals, and its benefits to all the nations, and that purpose of the linkage of Abraham, the Jewish nation, back to Adam Rishon, brings back creation to the idea of the creation. That creation, whole purpose, is a connection to the divine source, and it's a connection to its ultimate purpose, to bring down spirituality in this world. So therefore, when Abraham made this transaction, he wasn't simply securing a family plot. He was actually aligning the sacred geography of the land of Israel with fundamental purpose of creation. That is, that the holiness should be drawn down from the temple through the patriarchs and through the land of Israel, and that this physical world can be and must be sanctified, must be holy, and then from Israel itself, the holiness shines out to the rest of the world, and that can be sanctified through actual human activity for deeds of righteousness. So together, these three acquisitions that we mentioned, they stand as eternal pillars for everyone. Hebron, the arid city of Hebron, represents our roots, the beginning of the Jewish people in a way of faith. Jerusalem represents our spiritual center, where holiness radiates from, and that's the presence of God, and shows that Hashem dwells amongst us. And Shechem, which is the burial place of Joseph, which was explicitly written that it was purchased, represents our continuity, where the bones of Joseph, who was the bridge, because he was the prime minister of Egypt at the time, and he was sent down to Egypt to rule, and eventually became ruler of the land and nourished the people of Egypt. And through the famine times represents that idea of a bridge between the exile, redemption, and coming back to the land. And that's where he's laid to rest. So in all three of these areas were obtained in a sense of purity through open commercial transactions, demonstration that no sanctity has to stand on some sort of appropriation or stealing the land. No, they're actually paid for. And then the Torah narrative insists that the Jewish claim to the land of Israel must always be founded on moral legitimacy and with a divine purpose. So therefore, in any generation, and in every generation, when the question of Israel's right to the land of Israel rises, these areas in the Torah remind us and explicate explicitly that there is a foundation of ownership that the Jewish people have, that is in addition to the eternal promise that Hashem made to the people of Israel, that the land of Israel is theirs in a perpetual ownership. It was also purchased in a way of openness and righteousness, not just because there was a history, but this shows on that there is the history of the Jewish people, a mission that we have, and that the land of Israel gives evidence to that, and certainly Israel itself and the beauty and the flourishing of the land of Israel is a validation of the promise that that Hashem made to the people of Israel. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this in this class, and we'll continue. We'll continue now at next classes. Have a great day. Have a great week.